I was 20, and the city felt enormous. By day, I walked between lecture halls and tea houses, passing the bookstalls of Bayazit, where cigarette smoke curled around towers of secondhand paperbacks and yellowed journals. By night, I listened to cassette hiss in my narrow dorm room and the Bosphorus's foghorns drifting against the wind. It was autumn of '85. Sweaters pulled to the knuckles, kerosene smell in stairwells, the city forever half lit by power cuts and neon signs. I did not believe in magic. I believed in deadlines, in exam schedules pinned to corkboards, in good tea poured from dented kettles. But Istanbul has a way of letting the old breathe through the cracks of the new, and that semester the cracks felt closer. It began with a book that should not have been for sale. I found it at Sahaflar Çarşısı, tucked between a stack of Ottoman travelogues and a broken-back dictionary. The stall owner had a voice like gravel and a prayer bead coiled around his fingers. He never looked directly at me, only past me, as if someone stood at my shoulder. "Not for students," he said. "Then why display it?" I asked. "So I remembered to put it away." He hesitated, then wrapped it in a newspaper, pushing it toward me as though parting with something that had warmed his hands. I told him I didn't have enough lira. He shrugged, almost relieved, and said, "Pay later." His rosary clicked. Or don't. In my dorm, I peeled away the newspaper. The book was thin, bound in brown leather cracked like riverbeds. There was no title on the spine. Inside, the script ran dense and narrow, nothing like any printed Quran I had seen. This was a compendium of marginalia, commentaries scrawled at angles, talismanic grids that looked like honeycombs built by a distracted bee, invocations crossed out until the page grayed. A scholar's hand, but one desperate. In the margins, between the Arabic and Ottoman Turkish, someone had added neat, modern Turkish notes in pencil, like a patient annotating their own medical file. Most of it I didn't understand, but I recognized a few verses wrenched out of context, stitched to impossible instructions. I closed it, uneasy. The leather left a faint smell on my fingers, a sweet rot that lingered after washing. I told myself to return it the next day. I did not. In the next room lived Ferhat, a graduate student with a tired jaw and a smoker's cough. He was older than the rest of us by a few years, had a way of listening with his head tilted that made you feel he had pre-read your thoughts and found them thin. He studied history, spent his afternoons in archives where dust moved in the light like plankton. Sometimes he slept with the window open even in the damp of November, as if something outside needed to breathe through him. He noticed the book when I left my door ajar. "That one." He pointed with his cigarette. "Where did you get it?" "Sahaflar. The owner said it wasn't for students." "Makes sense," he muttered, then smiled without showing teeth. "What do you think it is?" "Nothing I can use. Nothing I want, either." "Then why keep it?" I didn't answer. We both watched his smoke lift and disappear into the hallway's yellow light. That week, I began waking at the same time each night, 3:17, certain I'd heard a knock. Not on the door, on the window pane, as if the fog itself had fingers. The knock never came twice, but after it, I always sensed a new word written on my tongue that I hadn't put there. I started catching things out of place. My tea glass moved 2 centimeters to the left. A pencil rolled uphill. In the library, someone had underlined a line in my notebook I hadn't written yet. I would blink and it would be gone, the page clean, as if what frightened me was my own eagerness to be frightened. I tried to return the book. The stall was there, the owner was not. A boy watched the counter and shook his head when I asked. "He's gone to prayer," he said, though the call had ended long ago. "Leave it if you want." But his eyes slid to the package in my hand as if it were a baby you should not leave without a mother. I took it back to the dorm. The power cut in the building that night lasted an hour. We gathered in the stairwell, a cluster of voices floating in darkness. Someone cracking sunflower seeds, someone telling a joke about a professor's bow tie. When the lights blinked on, we all flinched. It felt like waking in someone else's dream. I found Farhat on the landing between floors, standing still, listening for something no one else could hear. He said, "You ever read about arrangements of letters used as snares? Not prayers, not quite curses, nets." "For catching what?" I asked. "What do you think?" And I thought of stray dogs and then of other things, old as salt and smoke that live near thresholds, doors, windows, the edge of a prayer rug. Some people, he said, use the good to catch the dark. Some use the dark to imitate the good. I asked him how he slept. He said, "I don't," and smiled. It rained for 3 days. Istanbul turned to mirrors. Tram rails filled into silver lines. The puddles in Beyazıt Square made copies of pigeons and boots, and umbrellas and copies of those copies. My lectures blurred. I read the same paragraph 5 times and could not recall a single word. The book on my desk felt heavier each night, as if it absorbed the light that touched it and fed on the heat of my hands. The first time the writing moved, I thought a trick of my breath. On the page, a square divided into smaller squares, each with a letter. I blinked, and a letter at the corner crept to the next cell like a patient scout testing a fence. I shut the book so fast, my thumb jammed between pages. A paper cut opened along the crease of the knuckle, and the blood, thin from tea, touched the edge of a letter before I could wipe it. The paper drank.
I slept in my clothes. At 3:17, the knock came at the window. I did not answer. In the hall the next morning, someone had chalked a small circle on the floor by the stairwell, so faint you might miss it if you were rushing to class. Inside the circle sat a cheap tin ring, like those you win at a fair. I mentioned it to Farhat, expecting him to scoff. He went very still. "Don't step in it," he said. "I wasn't going to dance," I said, trying to be ordinary. "And don't touch the ring." His voice had moved somewhere lower, steadier. "If you pick it up, you accept. That's how these things start, with yes disguised as curiosity." "Start what?" He lit a cigarette. The match flare warmed his face for an instant. His eyes were rimmed with sleeplessness. "Ask your book." I did not at first, but curiosity is its own door. That evening, I opened to the back where the pages had been left blank by some exhausted hand. My cut knuckle throbbed. I pressed it to the paper, not hard, just enough to leave a small rust-colored comma. I expected the stain to spread. Instead, thin lines crept toward it from the margins, forming a shape like a keyhole, and then a key that did not fit. I shut the book, I shut the lights, I left for the tea house, because the tea house is where things are warm and counted and ordinary. On the walk, I passed a woman sweeping the stoop of a closed bakery. She lifted her chin in greeting and then frowned at something above me. I did not look up. In Istanbul, you learn not to chase every glance. That night, the dorm felt thinner. The walls had more echoes. In bed, I put a pillow over my head. I dreamed of ferries pulling away from docks that drifted with them, of minarets bending like reeds, of a hand tapping the window from the inside. At 3:17, I woke. The knock came again, soft, patient. "Who is it?" I asked before I could stop myself. A pause, and then my own voice answered, "Let me in. It's cold." I lay very still, listening to my breath catch and double. Something slid against the other side of the glass. I counted until dawn. The next day, I took the book to the campus library, thinking an ordinary place could make it small. I sat in a corner near the stacks on folklore and belief, where the fluorescent hum makes everything feel like a science experiment. Outside, boys argued over football, and a girl practiced scales on a flute she kept stopping to polish. The world, stubbornly itself. I opened the book, a new edition, neat, modern pencil, as before. A sentence in Turkish over a faint grid. Don't be afraid of the words, be afraid of the arrangements. I ran my finger over the line, smudging the graphite. When I lifted my hand, a thin film of gray clung to my skin. The smudge didn't blur, it moved. The letters swam beneath my touch, reforming into another sentence, one I had not read yet, but understood, intimately, as if transcribed from my thoughts. He will ask you to help. I closed the book, heart drumming in my throat. I left it under my arm and fled the reading room. In the corridor, Ferhat stood as if he had been waiting all morning. He smiled the smile of someone who had seen a bridge burn and decided to cross anyway. I need you tonight, just to read. It's harmless. I told him no. He squeezed my shoulder. You won't have to do anything, only look. The city was a thin shawl of mist and diesel. We took the long stairs to his building, 2 at a time. The stairwell smelled of toppled kerosene and boiled chickpeas. On the 3rd floor, a grandmother watered geraniums and did not see us. On the 4th, a baby stared past me and laughed. In his room, the curtains were drawn. On the floor, chalk and ash had tracked a pale geometry around the carpet. Books lay open like mouths interrupted mid-sentence. A bowl held something that might have been salt once and was now a memory of salt. On the table, a square mirror rested face down, like a sleeping animal. I have tried 5 nights. It answers and then turns away. It wants a witness. I think it wants yours. Why me? Because you brought it something it likes, and because it keeps knocking at your window. I sat. He lit a candle. The room shrugged off its modernness and became what it had wanted to be all along, a chamber for waiting. He opened a notebook, wrote something in a neat hand, then covered the words with his palm, as if embarrassed by their nakedness. He warned softly, "Don't repeat what I say. If you do, it repeats through you." He set the mirror upright. The candle's flame doubled and then thinned, as if drawn through a needle. He spoke, not a prayer, not anything I recognized, a braid of familiar syllables cut and retied. It felt like watching someone hold a scripture upside down. The mirror fogged. I smelled seawater and damp wood, ferry decks after rain. The room receded. The mirror became the size of a window, then the size of a door. At first, I saw nothing. Then a shadow passed, slow as cloud on a winter afternoon. Another. The fog thinned, and behind it lay not a place, but the suggestion of a place, a corridor without walls, a street without buildings, a threshold that led only to more threshold. It had the ache of an unspoken name. Something moved, like a thought deciding to take form. Ferhat's voice lowered so I could feel it in my teeth. The mirror's surface shifted, grew shallow, like a pool filling with light that remembered being water. I realized, with a clarity so clean it hurt, that what we had opened was not a window, but a mouth. A whisper rose from it, many whispers, braided, words I almost recognized. My name threaded through them, tugged loose and tied again. Ferhat's hand trembled. He did not stop. He spoke a line that my vision stuttered, as if someone had taken frames from the film of the room and misordered them. I saw the candle burn down and rise, ash lift and fall, my own hands open and close around the book I was certain I had dropped. A shape leaned close within the mirror, no face, only a depth deeper than glass should hold. Something touched my attention from the inside, like a finger pressing just behind the eyes. I said, "Enough," my voice small in my throat. "Close it." "It isn't open yet," he whispered. "Then what is that?" "It is asking." The shape tilted, listening. The whispers looped, fixed on one word, a word I realized was not my name, yet carried the taste of it. It wanted, what? Permission, or correction, or invitation, disguised as curiosity? I did what you should never do. I answered. Yes, I said. It felt like biting a live wire. The mirror breathed in. The candle guttered and elongated, a white vein. The chalk lines on the carpet brightened as if lit from beneath. My skin pulled tight, as if the room had lowered its pressure to rend me. The book on my lap fluttered, its pages rifled with a sound like many birds, then stopped. The grids had rearranged themselves, letters drifting and locking into a design that made the corner of my eye ache when I tried to see it fully. In the mirror's depth, something smiled without a mouth. Farhat made a sound between wonder and terror. "Do you see it?" he asked. "I don't want to," I said, and the shape leaned closer, delighted as a teacher when a student finally admits confusion. It spoke, not in any language I could name, not aloud. The sentence arrived inside me, fully built. "You knocked." "I didn't," I said, and understood again too late how these arrangements work. A denial can be a door, if shaped like an answer. The mirror darkened. The room went cold enough for our breath to bloom and vanish. The candle's last inch bent and touched its own wax, a snake remembering its tail. The whispers climbed, loud enough to scrape the walls. "Close it," I said, louder, and reached for the mirror. Farhat caught my wrist. "If we break it, we make another." His eyes were dreadful then, wide, glossy, as if reflecting some light I could not see. His lips moved silently around a sentence I recognized as a verse, and then did not, the way a prayer can be pressed too hard into something else until even the vowels bruise. The mirror's surface thinned to a membrane. On the other side, the corridor that was not a corridor extended, doors without rooms yawning open like held breaths. At the edge of that threshold stood a figure with my height and my posture and my thrift store jacket, head tilted as if listening for a life it would borrow. Where its face should have been was only a gloss that caught the candlelight and made a mouth of it. "No," I said, not to Farhat, not to the shape, but to the line drawn between us. I blew out the candle. The room did not go dark. It went black, in the way of an eclipse, a disk sliding over the sun. The mirror sighed out. The chalk lines went ashy and ordinary. Our breath came back warm. I heard the call to prayer outside, thin through the damp, earnest as always, and for a moment I thought the room had returned to itself. Then the call doubled. An echo followed a fraction late, as if the city had learned to stutter. We did not move. When we did not look at each other. "Get out," Farhat said, voice gray with exhaustion. "Take your book, throw it into the sea." I left without arguing. On the stairs, the grandmother had fallen asleep in her chair, prayer beads tangled in her fingers. The baby on the 4th floor laughed once in its sleep and then held its breath so long I put my ear to the door before it cried again. Down on the street, puddles held a second city that did not follow the same pedestrians. Every reflection seemed late by a thought. The Bosphorus was a black ribbon. Ferries moaned from their berths. I walked to the Galata Bridge and stood where fishermen stand at dawn, and I held the book above the water as if it were a person whose forgiveness I needed to beg. Behind me, the city breathed. From somewhere far off, a loudspeaker crackled and then smoothed, human hands tuning the divine to a frequency that fit tin. I did not throw the book. I could say it was because I feared littering the sea with what it did not deserve, or because some stupid romance in me likes to keep souvenirs from near disasters. But the truth is simpler
and uglier. I believed I could keep it harmless if I kept it close. That is how yes sounds when it wants to survive. I wrapped it. I walked home in the rain that began like an apology and turned to needles. In the dorm corridor, I paused by my window. The glass trembled, not from wind, from a knuckle that had learned the rhythm of my breath. I slept with the light on because we assign meaning to bulbs as if they were sentries. I woke at 3:17 because some appointments keep themselves. The knock came. "Not tonight," I whispered, throat raw. Silence. Then my voice from the glass. "Let me in. It's cold." When dawn broke, the city was ordinary again, the kind of ordinary that makes the extraordinary possible. Students filled the square, the bookstalls opened, tea glasses moved 2 centimeters to the left and no one noticed. In the stairwell, the chalk circle had been smudged by many shoes, the tin ring gone. Ferhat's door was closed. A paper had been slid under it by the building manager, rent due. I passed the Sahaflar stall on my way to class. The owner had returned. He watched me without blinking, beads slipping through his fingers with a sound like rain seeking a drain. "You kept it," he said. "For now." He nodded as if I had delivered a weather report he already knew. "The older things," he said, "don't mind the city. The city minds them. It learns to walk around them. You should do the same." I want to return it. There are returns, and there is returning. One is a receipt. The other is a road. He did not hold out his hand. I walked away. By midday, the rain had gone, leaving a sky as thin as paper. From the lecture hall window, I could see the blue minarets pricked against it, a call to prayer rising clean without echo. I felt a relief so sharp it bordered on hysteria, the kind that makes you want to laugh at nothing. Then, my notebook slid a centimeter by itself. A pencil rolled uphill, and from the back of the room, the sound of knuckles on glass, 3 patient taps, came not from the window, but from the glass of the classroom door. Everyone turned to look. No one stood there. I lowered my eyes to the blank page. The faintest damp heat bloomed across the paper, as if breath leaned close. Letters formed in condensation, then faded. You said yes. I shut the notebook. I opened it again. It was clean. At night I dreamed of streets that led only to other streets, of doors opening into stairwells that opened into doors. I kept the book in a drawer, wrapped and tied, as if string were a covenant. I learned to sleep through 3:17. Most nights I succeed. I tell myself I escaped. The city agrees, mostly. It goes on. Ferries, tea, exams, lovers arguing under eaves, cats stepping between prayer rugs. There is just this. Sometimes, walking home, I pass a dark window and see my reflection lift a hand, a heartbeat before I do. Sometimes the call to prayer catches on a distant loudspeaker and doubles, and the second voice is mine. And sometimes, passing the Sahaflar stall at dusk, I feel the book I did not throw shifting in my bag like a small animal that has decided to hibernate, and I know, quietly, practically, that not everything we close is closed. At 3:17, the city holds its breath, and somewhere a knuckle taps once, twice, patient as a clerk who knows your name.